Well, we've been working on a series for a number of weeks now called The Revolution. And working off the idea that what Jesus was bringing into the world was a radical, revolutionary thing. And as Paul describes it in one of his letters, it's the making of a new humanity in this world. And what kind of impact that new humanity would have. And as we've been talking, we talked about how, he had these large crowds following him at the beginning, and they got bigger and bigger as he moved from place to place. Miracles were going on. And then he centers his attention on 12 men, just like the 12 tribes of Israel. And he centers his attention there, and they would be called his disciples. And we looked at, when he has this time together with them, and he focuses his attention with them, and he's going to teach them about this revolutionary idea, this revolutionary way of being and knowing God and interacting with the world. What does he tell them? We looked at the Sermon on the Mount, and he tells them in a very, very big, grand way, you all are the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. And you hear those kind of big things, and these guys would have been just as shocked by that as we are today. Because they're, a lot of them are fishermen, they're average people, tax collector among them. I mean, these are people you'd run into at the, Walmart. These are average people. None of these guys, come from royalty and have any kind of big name to themselves. But he points to them. And he says, you are the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. And so naturally you would hear that. You go, well, what does that mean? I mean, how do you live that out? I mean, what does that look like? We need some examples, Jesus. And so that's exactly what he does. He starts giving them examples of what that looks like. Because in a world that's burdened by sin, that's corrupted by sin, that is just breaking apart under the weight of sin, what does it look like for them to live this new humanity, to be salt and light? And he starts talking to them about murder. And they probably would have been quite shocked by that, because that's something that, we would naturally think, well, that's just obvious. That's the sixth commandment. I mean, why are we going over that? But he starts talking to them about murder, and then he starts bringing the attention down to the words they use, and how they can be toxic, and how they can be destructive, and how they can be slanderous and hurtful. And then he starts talking about how there's something even behind that is toxic and harmful and is sinful. You remember what it was? You remember what it was? Starts with an A. Anger. And he talks about that, and it's just a very unique kind of thing that he's tying all these things together when he's discussing the sixth commandment. And then he starts talking about lust and how that ends up to being coveting. And he says, that's a problem, because that leads to what? Adultery. Yeah. And so he's getting at them more and more to look inside their heart, to examine themselves and stop looking at, okay, yeah, you can do this and do that, but go deeper. Look at yourself, look in the mirror, let the law penetrate you and show you who you really are. Be honest. And so he's talking about that, and then that's where we left off. So today, I want to ask you a question. Do you ever have something in your life that you loved? I mean, it could be a job, it could be a task, it could be a hobby, it could be a sport, a game, something like that. You ever have something in your life that you just really loved? I mean, you just looked forward to doing it. You thought about it when you weren't doing it. That's how much you loved it. But you were honest, you'd say, well, I love doing this. I mean, I love this, but there's that 1% of that I don't like. I love this. I love it so much, and I've always had, it's a big thing to me. But there's one part of this that I don't like. And if I had my choice, we wouldn't do that part. Do you ever have something like that you, like I said, could be on a job that you liked everything about it, but man, there's that 1% that you're just like, not very fond of that. I could leave that off and be just fine. You ever have something like that? What do you think of, Miss Eileen?
I love to dig in the dirt.
Okay. Gardening?
And I also love to sew.
Okay.
And as far as a job goes, I enjoyed working on clocks. I could not tune them for very long because I'm tone deaf. But I just look at life as a challenge. I love it.
Okay. So you loved it. Was there something about you didn't like? Like maybe just like 1%, just like this little?
That was something I didn't like, but we won't go into that. When they first started making alarm clocks, that was more of a challenge than anybody wanted to fool with. Well, one line made the alarm clocks. And I guess there was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,000 of them. They all come back because of a defect. Well, guess whose line got those rejects?
I think I know whose line got the rejects.
Mine did. And there was a little bit of discussion, hot and heavy, over it.
Mm-hmm. Anybody relate? Anybody got something in mind that you just really like doing, you love doing it, but there's that 1% of that you could just do without. It's just not something that you want to hang on to. Anybody else got something else coming to mind? You like it real well, but that 1% you could just do without.
I like most aspects of my job, but I hate meetings.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you like the job, you like maybe the people you work with and a lot of other things, but you could just do without the meetings. Yeah, I think that's
one thing I hated about the meetings.
You relate. Okay.
I heard somebody said the other day, the only way they would have a meeting is to make everybody stand up. The whole meeting. That way the meeting didn't last too long. That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
That is a very good idea, Mike.
I'm going to have a boss that wants to have a meeting once a week. But then he's the one that doesn't show up for the meeting, so after a while, the meetings just go away, and then he gets mad because nobody comes to the meeting.
You speaking from experience?
Experience.
Yeah, experience. If you thought about it, you probably could think, there's a lot of different things you may love. You may love golf, you may like fishing and hunting and baseball, and you just name it. You might have a hobby like sewing and different things that you just love. But there's that 1% of that you're not so fond of. But it's just part of it, It's just part of it. Well, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about me growing up. It was football. I've been playing football, like rec department football, since I was 6. So I had pads on my whole life, with the helmet and the whole deal. And liked football, liked everything about it. I watched football on TV. My friends and I talked about football. I collected football cards. I mean, that was it. And I've been playing it as I grew up. I like football practice. I like football games. I like doing that. One thing I didn't like, though, the 1%, was a drill in football called Bull in the Ring. And what it was, if you're not familiar, is they get usually the offense and the defense broken up. They get the whole group around in a circle. They all got their pads on ready, and they put one guy in the middle of all of it. So he's standing there, and all these people are circled around him, and he's the bull in the ring. And he has to put his hand out like this, pointing, and he spins around. And whenever he stops, whoever he's pointing at, Well, they got to go at it and see who's going to push each other out of that ring. You're just knocking heads, knocking pads. That's how you did it. I didn't like that. I really didn't like it. Because you can spin around, and what you're trying to do, and the coach is watching, sometimes more than one coach, and they know what you're trying to do when you spin around. You're trying to stop on the guy that's smaller than you, right? Or the guy who's not any bigger than you, at least. So you're spinning around, you stop, and then all of a sudden, you line up and you go hit him. So the coaches got onto that. So if they thought you were spinning too long, they would, hut, and then whoever you stopped at, when they said that, you had to go at it. One day in high school, spinning around, I'm the bull in the ring. Like I said, I don't even enjoy this, but it's that 1%. And I'm spinning around. Coach realized I'm just looking for the kid smaller than me. He goes, hut! And I stop. There's Tony Head. They called him the Train. At least they did after that day. And I see Tony, I was like, and he's coming, he's ready for it. He's just looking for it. He's the biggest, strongest guy on the team. And so I'm going, and I'm like 40 pounds less than I am now, so I'm not much of a player. So I'm going at him head first. It's me and Tony Head. Bull in the ring, me or him. The Train. You know what happened next? You want to know what happened next?
You're right. You got run over.
I don't know what happened next. I was seeing stars. I was seeing Elvis and Marilyn and John Wayne. I was just on my back. I don't know what happened. I never felt it. It was just so fast. He just ran right through me. He ended up playing for, I think, the University of Tennessee. That's that 1% I didn't like. And he made me really know it. Now, I say all that because what we're going to talk about today is that 1% of the Sermon on the Mount. Because if you've read it, and most Christians have, there's a lot you can relate to. And there's a lot that you may find very challenging. But there's something about reading it and listening to it and kind of internalizing it that makes you think, you know what? That's a challenge and that's hard. And I'm not sure how, but I would like to be able to do that. I would like to be able to live that way. I would like to, be that person that Jesus is talking about. But there's that 1% that we get to and we go, I don't even think I want to be that person. I like everything Jesus is telling me. I think he is 100% right. He is God in the flesh. He is my teacher, my Lord. But Jesus, there's that 1% that I just like to skip over if I could. There's that 1% I just like to leave out if I could. We're going to talk about that today. Here's the thing, just to preface it. Here's the good news. And when I go over it, you're going to know it. It's very familiar. Here's the good news. That 1% that you kind of cringe and want to look the other way and have a hard time dealing with, you probably misunderstood what he was saying. That's the good news. Because it may mean something to you that it shouldn't. That's the good news. Now here's the bad news. It's probably more challenging than you even thought. So it doesn't probably say what you thought it said, and you might have misunderstood it. But the bad news is that it's probably just as challenging as what you were thinking anyways. But it's different. And so that's what I want to get at today. That's where our focus is going to be. The focus is going to be today on a misunderstood command. Jesus is in the Sermon on the Mount talking to his disciples, and there's been a lot of years and a lot of things that have kind of gone into us misunderstanding it. but we're going to clarify it today. And we're going to talk about a misunderstood command. And like I said, for a lot of you, it's that 1%. When it's brought up or when you read it, you just assume, just pass on over it. A misunderstood command. Say that with me. A misunderstood command. One more time. A misunderstood command. Okay? So if you have your Bibles or look at it on a tablet or a screen in some way, go to the book of Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew. And when you get there, go to chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. Now, so we follow the train of thought and what Jesus is saying to these disciples. You know, we see him talking about the sixth commandment, murder and anger, and the problem with words that are used in a slanderous way. We see him talking about lust, coveting, and adultery. And so it would make sense for us to then hear him talk about marriage, because that kind of goes along with the problem of adultery. So then he talks about marriage, and then he talks about having integrity in your words, keeping your vows. You can see why that might relate again to marriage. So he's talking about all this, and we're following him along. And then let's put our attention on verse 27. Matthew 5:27. Jesus says, "You have heard it was said," oh, no. Do not do that. 38. There we go. 38. I'm backed up to last week's. Okay. 5:38. "You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." There are people that have never been in a church, never opened a Bible, never even considered doing that. But they know that verse. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Right? That's a very popular, highly quoted phrase from the Bible. Okay? Now here is the problem. First, understand what that means. This came about, and this is from the Old Testament, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This came about for two big reasons. One is because you want an equity, you want some kind of equality in judgment. Right? You want it to be fair. Right? If somebody does something to cause harm and maybe cause your donkey to die, well, then you expect that donkey to be replaced. Not by two donkeys, but by a donkey. And so it just had a broad appeal like that to make things fair and equitable judgment. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The second reason is that, now this may surprise you, that maybe somebody was a different class, wealthier. Well, they could kind of talk to the judge, do a little bit of bargaining, and then all of a sudden it's not eye for an eye. You don't get back what you lost. Because they've, massaged the law a little bit and got the judge to make a different kind of verdict. So this kept everybody, rich or poor, on the same playing field. Fairness. Okay? So that's one thing to know. The other thing to know is that this was made for a judicial judgment. This is you were before a judge. This is like a court proceeding. This is the ones who handed down this judgment. All right? The problem arose was because with this Roman occupation, and the Jewish people had lived under, foreign leadership for so many years as well, that how it got applied was this way. It was no longer part of a judicial thing. It was taken outside the judgment of a court, of a judge. It was taken outside, and it was put into the hands of every single person. And so the idea was, if you are wronged, and somebody has taken from you, some damages, something where it needs to be an eye for an eye, like that, well then you need to make it right. You had the responsibility to do that. You had it in your hands. You are judge, jury, and sheriff. See, it's no longer an impartial judge who's hearing your case. It's now put in your hands. Okay, now you deal with it. See the problem? Now here's the other thing. The rabbis were teaching not only was it in your hands, but it was God's law that you had to do it. So now it had the extra pressure on them. So no longer was it something like you were wronged, but you wanted to, work it out with who wronged you and just maybe, kind of forgive some of it or whatever. No. The pressure on you was you take care of it. It is on you. You must, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Because remember, we talked about this in one of our Sunday night classes. This was an honor and shame culture. And so it was shameful. You lose your honor if you do not go forward with this and demand on your own eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You are judge, jury, and sheriff in this scenario. It's not easy to see why this created a problem. This is what Jesus is pointing to. And then he goes on. Verse 39. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, well, turn to him the other also. And there's that 1%. That we think about this and we go, whoa, this can get out of hand, Jesus. What are we talking about here? I like everything else you said before and after, but Jesus, I don't know about this. What are you saying? Well, here's two things as we go forward. One, it's not talking anything about self-defense. Okay? This is not Jesus' teaching on self-defense. So it's not that. And two, it's not Jesus telling you to be a doormat and let people just run all over you and beat you up. Okay? So, look at it first. It says, but I tell you, do not resist. Now, that's been translated, that word there has been translated resist ever since King James scholars put it in writing. But over the years, it means a little different. And we misunderstand it. So here's what Jesus is talking about. And here's a word to put in its place so you understand it a little more clearly. Oppose. Remember, this is in a judicial setting. That's how this is originally to be applied by a judge. And what Jesus is saying, do not oppose an evil person. What he's saying is, do not, in this scenario, he's saying, don't retaliate. Don't even bring it before a judge. Don't even bother going to court over this, is what he's saying. Okay? Do not oppose an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Jesus is very specific. Which cheek? Did you catch it? Which cheek?
Right.
Huh? The right cheek, yes. That's what he says. He says, if someone strikes you on the right cheek. Now, you're standing there, and most everybody, there's a small percentage, but most everybody's right-handed. So if they're striking you on the right cheek, they're striking you with the back of their hand. See, this is a slap. This is more about insult, not injury. This is about insult, not injury. That's what somebody's doing here with that. They are slapping somebody with the back of their hand. This is about insult, not injury. You can insult somebody incredibly bad, as we saw Jesus make mention of, by saying raka to the other things. That's verbal. But you can push that insulting to somebody so far that it even becomes physical. That's what the back of the hand slap. And Jesus is saying, even if they insult you that bad, don't bring it to court. Don't even bother bringing it to a judge. They may insult you, they may say these things to you. Don't put it to court. And even if they go as far as a backhand, don't bring it to court. Now this was a very big deal because in this honor and shame culture, you did not look away from this. This was the most disrespectful, humiliating, embarrassing thing you could suffer in public. That's the most disrespectful thing somebody could do to you, is to give you the backhanded smack. That is what he's talking about. And it was so bad that if you brought it to a judge at this time, and you said, this person struck me, and we got into a fight, but he started it, right? Or the scenario was, this person gave me a backhanded slap. You got more of a fine for giving somebody a backhand. Even though you may pulverize them with your fists. You may break bone, you may bruise whatever with your fist. But we're talking about honor and shame here. You crossed the line when you gave them the back of your hand. And so the judges would actually impose more of a fine for this. That's how serious it was to them in that culture. Now, Jesus is saying, don't retaliate. Even if you suffer this, don't take it to a judge. Because here's the thing. It's not about injury. And it's not about your cheek. It's about your pride. It's not about your cheek getting red and you kind of suffering this embarrassment. It's not about your cheek. It's not about you being physically injured. It's not the kind of thing we're talking about here. We're not talking about self-defense. We're not talking about this. We're talking about your pride. Because it's not your cheek that's hurt and injured. It's your pride in this scenario. You have been embarrassed. You've been humiliated. You've been disrespected to the highest degree. Publicly. And why do you boil? Why do you want to get back at him? why do you want to hit back? And why do you want to bring them to court? Make them pay that exorbitant fee. Why? Because of your pride. Because your self-worth has been damaged in the eyes of those around you. Because your ego has been bruised. Your cheek isn't, but your ego's been bruised. That's the issue. Your self-worth has been damaged. Your pride has been hurt. That's the issue. It's not about your cheek. It's about your pride. You're insecure. Big surprise, right? Like you didn't already know that. You're insecure. And when your pride rises up, it's because it is feeling that insecurity. Because your idea of self-worth is based on what they think. It's based on what your mom thinks. It's based on what your children think. It's based on what your employer thinks. It's based on what the rest of your family thinks. It's based on others. And here you are, embarrassed, in public, and you're boiling. Why? It's not because you were injured. It's because somebody challenged your pride and embarrassed you. And so you boil. But here's the thing. The more you identify with Christ, the less you have a pride issue. Because Christ was spit on. And you say, how dare they treat me that way? Christ was insulted, beaten. They pulled his beard out. We don't see that in the movies and in paintings, do we? A beardless Jesus. Think of what kind of trauma that goes through. Think where somebody putting their foot on your face to pull that out. But you're too good to suffer an insult. You've got your pride. But if you identify with Christ, you know what? I don't have to deal with my self-worth based on you or you or you. I've got the King of Kings approval. He is my king. And my king says he will handle this. I don't have to go to a judge, and I don't have to strike back, and I don't have to bother about this. Because the judge of all judges is going to handle it. And he is thorough. And he is right. And I can give it to his hands. And I don't have to worry about my silly pride. He will deal with it. If you don't believe me, read Revelation. He will deal with it. He will balance the books. He will take care of business. And Jesus is saying, let that pride go. Don't even bother with it in court. And so now that you see this as not being what maybe you originally thought it was, this is a pride issue. Like Jesus is continually going back to the heart of the problem. See how many problems are rooted in this? Your petty arguments, somebody stepping on your toes, somebody disrespecting you, somebody talking about you. See how much strife and pain it causes? See how society and families just kind of crumble under all this? Because our pride just won't let us. No, we got to say something back. We got to do something back. We got to even the score. And we should just identify with Christ. Let him handle it. He will. And lay our pride aside. That's what we're called to do. As the music plays this morning, that's what I want to put on your heart. Because maybe you misunderstood this verse and Didn't say exactly what maybe you first thought it did, but it says something equally challenging. And again, it goes to our heart and how we need to respond.